Hello and welcome back to the Bird's Eye View podcast. We are here on Friday, December 20th, and it's been a while. It's been a while since we last chatted during the winter meetings. It's been a little bit of a slumbery stretch for the baseball free agent market. I'm your host, Zach Worden, joined as always by Jori Negin-Shecter. And Jori, how have you been enjoying the quietest time of year?
Yes, it's certainly been a bit of a lull, a bit of a no-show for the Blue Jays of late. There have been moves around Major League Baseball, perhaps most notably the Yankees have gotten very busy, so the Blue Jays have some catching up to do. But as far as the team themselves, it's been a lot of radio silence with a few whispers here and there on what might happen.
Yeah, it's at this point it's all speculation, it's all rumors. Everybody's kind of waiting for the next shoe to drop. And I mean, at this time of year, we're looking for anything to talk about when it comes to the Blue Jays and Ken Rosenthal. He gave us a late night read. I'm not sure if there was a ton of reading into what he wrote specifically that is totally um gonna make a huge impact on the way that the Blue Jays offseason unfolds. But nonetheless, interesting to get an MLB's insiders or an MLB insider's thoughts on where the Blue Jays are at with both Bo Bichette, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and apparently Alex Bregman.
Yeah, the Alex Bregman stuff was maybe the newest of that, just in terms of the raw information, so to speak. The Blue Jays had obviously been linked very casually to Bregman, but kind of pouring cold water on that was Rosenthal. I think the biggest thing is probably the Vladdy extension, just in terms of the magnitude of the conversation, in terms of the relevance of the conversation, because obviously in the fallout of the Juan Soto deal, there's been a lot of talk about needing to extend Vlad and needing to do so imminently. And it really sounds like that's going to be a very difficult task if the market plays out the way Rosenthal is describing it. Of course, the other big news in there, a Bo Bichette trade, or rather a lack thereof, likely coming down the pipeline. So I think the Vlad thing would be the first thing that we should probably dig into, just in terms of how expensive he's going to be if they hope to retain him and if they even will be able to.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, like the piece where he goes, picture the Blue Jays keeping Vladimir Guerrero Jr. long term, trading Bo Bichette, and signing Alex Bregman. And then in the next paragraph, he goes, none of those outcomes is particularly likely. All,
Yeah,
however, are
not
in
not
play.
how I would have written that
So
lead.
yeah, you're gonna write your story by saying, picture all this happening, and then being like, it's actually not gonna happen. So you don't really, do you need to read on further? Who knows? But yeah, the Guerrero stuff, I mean, super interesting. He says in the piece that I mean, he floats the 500 to 600 million dollar range, and I know that the 500 to 600 number, or the 500 number at least, has kind of been the snap reaction to the Soto deal for Vlad. And I think there was some reporting like that was maybe a little bit too reactionary following the Juan Soto deal, and that is a $500 million deal really going to be out there for a first baseman? Maybe it could be, but it'll be interesting to see. And I don't think that the Blue Jays are going to be giving Vladimir Guerrero Jr. $500 million this offseason. I think that 500 million, that's like got to be kind of an open market thing for him to go get. But yeah, it seems interesting, like just to see where that number will fall eventually. And it does seem like if there is going to be a deal done, that first week of January, as ARB numbers are discussed, like maybe that is kind of the launching point for what eventually would become more of a long-term deal.
Yeah, the $500 million figure is frightening. I don't know if it's realistic, but again, just based on how close to free agency Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is, it kind of seems like you might be getting into that territory just based on that open market factor, and that he's unlikely to resign before he tests the waters, right? I mean, he's repeatedly said he wants to be a Blue Jay, so that much is at least, some cause for optimism. But I mean, I remain concerned that this is a team that's going to head into, June, July below the 500 mark and struggling to tread water. And the allure of trading him is probably going to be too strong.
What number would you give him today?
I mean, I don't think his number has changed from that 350 mark that, at the time would have still been one of the richest contracts in baseball history if he signed it, right? His contract figure going up $50 million because of Juan Soto doesn't make sense to me because Juan Soto is a different type of player, right? And obviously, there's a certain floor, there's a certain ceiling that those kind of deals tend to shuffle. But if Vlad Guerrero Jr. was worth $350 million on November 1st, then on January 1st, a couple days from now, I have a hard time seeing where this $150 million comes from.
Yeah, it's funny, with this front office where it seems like, hey, what's the difference between 350 and like 400 if that gets the deal done? Like it seems like just do it to get the deal done, secure your future. Like there's a lot more in play with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. than the contract and the player. I believe. I think with his deal, there comes kind of, setting your next window, adding a little bit of certainty beyond 2025, and I think paying for that is worth doing. And it doesn't just come, oh, we're just signing this player for 13 years. There's other things that are in consideration there. And I think where the Blue Jays are at, like they just need to add a little bit of certainty beyond this year because right now there is very little certainty on the roster outside of what you're going to get from some of these guys in 2025. But beyond that, and obviously, there are problems. I would assume, if you're going to be going after free agents, not having that certainty beyond 2025 probably hurts you in those negotiations because you're going to have to overpay or at least beat other offers from other teams. And this front office doesn't necessarily seem like the one that's going to go out and go past their valuations and overspend on a player to beat out another offer. Um, when they have shown a reluctance to do that.
Yeah. I mean, listen, correct me if I'm wrong, but for 2027, so that's obviously not this year, not the year after, but 2027, it's like Andres Jimenez, Yariel Rodriguez, and is there anybody else that has guaranteed money on the Blue Jays payroll beyond 2026? Because Bassett's a penny free agent. Gosman's a free agent the year after that. I mean, Barrios has an opt out. I'm trying to think if there are any guys beyond that stretch, beyond Jimenez and Yariel Rodriguez that are on the books. Like
There is
it's
not.
there's you want to talk about uncertainty. They added the only guy with any term in the last 2 weeks. So they deeply need to find some clarity. And as we've said on a number of occasions, signing Vlad would do just that.
Yeah, and I think I don't know what the number needs to be to get that done, but I don't necessarily think that it's going to be a number that it would look egregious in a year's time, right? Like I don't think that you're paying him 380 to 400 million today, and then next offseason you're looking at it and saying, oh well, we probably should have walked him to free agency and been able to get him for 350 or whatever. I mean, I know the report was out
Like
there that he
what
rejected
what
the 340.
circumstance? Yeah, what circumstance could possibly happen where he's cheaper in a year and he's more willing to sign in a year? There isn't
like
one.
like if he has a catastrophic injury, and even then, like say he tears an ACL or something, right? Like I still think he probably gets a pretty nice deal in free agency.
Like even as a first baseman, he's not going to be that cumbered by or encumbered by any injury because the nature of the position, he doesn't need the athleticism. He doesn't have the athleticism right now, and he's still a really electric player.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation, and I mean, we'll see. I just think especially as you get past, like if they go through arbitration, it would be hilarious to me if they like agreed on an arb number, but not an extension. Um, but I think as we that date will kind of be the one where we know whether or not he's going to be extended.
Just in terms of if there's certainty, you think, or you're thinking that's probably the day.
I just think if they're talking salaries and they kind of agree on what his value is for 2025, I feel like that could probably lead to some bigger conversations. But if they don't agree on what his value is for 2025, then then obviously there's going to be a difference in opinion on what his value would be long term as well. So it seems like an extension there would be unlikely. But again, you know what? I mean, if you're Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and you're reading this Ken Rosenthal article and he puts the $600 million number in there, how can you not like go to free agency and be like, I'm gonna have another great season. I'm gonna emerge, solidify my spot as one of the best young hitters in baseball, which he already is. But I mean, we have seen kind of that inconsistency. So for him, I think you look at that and you're like, well, I mean, if the Blue Jays are going to offer me 380 over 12, but I am seeing somebody say that I could earn 600 million. Like what's the difference for him to walk to free agency, see if that's numbers there, and then if it's not like he can't come back and accept that 380 million or 340 or whatever it is if it turns out that that 500 to 600 million dollar offer isn't going to be available next winter.
Yeah, like again, I'll repeat what I said earlier, where he wants to be a Blue Jay. So you would hope that there's some sort of hometown discount or something to that effect available, right? And if he hits the open market and he's open to continuing discussion with the Blue Jays, listen, like the Blue Jays need Vladimir Guerrero Jr. in a lot of ways more than he needs them. So they're going to have to show some flexibility and even presumably go beyond where their comfort range might end up.
Let's talk about Bo because I think that's probably where there might be more realistic action this offseason is if there is a Bo Bichette trade. Obviously, they acquired his potential replacement this offseason, and it seems, like if there are like I mean, I don't think that there's necessarily whispers that a trade is imminent or that they're coming, but I mean there's whispers that they're listening, and obviously this Rosenthal piece kind of says that. And of course it also says that they, you know, have the bar set super high for a trade, which realistically they should, right? And I think Bo Bichette, the man of no flow anymore, um, just is probably due for a pretty big 2025. And but again, you know what I mean? The writing seems to be on the wall that he's going to be signing elsewhere next offseason if he does go to free agency. So how do you kind of handle that, right? I think it's a tough question to look at him and where he's at and just think, well, if you're going to be losing him, wouldn't it make sense to trade him? But he's also has the lowest value he could possibly have right now. I think if you hold on to him and he is good, then the trade deadline return is probably better than what you're getting for him in this offseason. But if he's bad to begin the year, then obviously you're missing out on. I don't think that the trade value would really tank that much, but obviously you'd be getting more for him now than you would at the trade deadline because obviously the bounce back would be more believable for anybody that's interested in acquiring him.
I'm just struggling to imagine a scenario that it makes much sense to move Bo Bichette because if the idea is to compete this year and that's how they're acting, then trading Bo Bichette at this stage would be antithetical to doing so because if a hypothetical Bo Bichette clone was available in free agency and you could get him on some kind of bargain bin deal, the Blue Jays would be all in on that. So to me, Bo Bichette is exactly the kind of guy that the Blue Jays would be hunting down if he was available on either the trade market or in the free agency market. He's
He would be the 2021 Marcus Semien for another team.
exactly that. So it doesn't make any sense to be looking to move off him or to be trying to to deal him unless you're trading him as a 5-win player and no one's paying for him as a 5-win guy. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, it'd be so interesting to see like what you would get back for him because, at this point, are you are you getting like what are you what are you getting back for him, right? Like it's a crazy question, and I'd love to know like what the value looks like because there just doesn't really seem to be, how do you trade a 26-year-old who is an all-star level talent, but just is coming off the worst season of his career, and obviously, does have some concerning trends in the way that he swings the bat. Um, and isn't a great defender, right? Like, I mean, there's just so many questions there, and I think that you need to have, we talked about certainty earlier. I think that you need to have some more certainty around the Bichette situation about what he is and what he can be, and whether there actually is, he ended the year with that article or with those quotes to Shy on Sportsnet where he was talking about, he wanted to stay in Toronto with Vlad and win championships. It's, is that really going to be the case if the Blue Jays are not giving him the huge deal?
Yeah, it's like at this point, it's almost you kind of want to just throw your hands up in the air and just be like, what do you do? Because there's so much frustration, it feels like, with the uncertainty. It makes me immensely frustrated. It feels like it's just the whole situation feels like it's been botched, but I just don't know what outcome could have, gone better. Maybe if they make the playoffs in 2021, maybe something happens, but like we're talking years of missteps and years of misfortune at this point.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this last night, right? Where the Vlad thing, right? Like if Vlad has the year that he just had in 2022 or 2023, he's probably extended. I would assume, right? Like
That
you
seems
you
like a
probably
safe
buy
thing
out
to say.
multiple years of arbitration. But the fact that his best season or his second best season came so close, like 1 year away from being a free agent, right? Like he's that much closer to earning his payday. So why would he not just wait versus, if he has like a really great year in 2023, it's like, well, free agency is still 2 years away. So yeah, I'm interested in negotiating an extension. And when you look at Bo Bichette, obviously the thing with him was like he was so consistent until this awful year. So, you know, if he had another consistent year like he did but before 2024 in 2024, then maybe there's, calls for an extension there. Could you imagine if Bo was really really good in 2024 and the extension conversations that we'd be having for both of them right now?
It would be just a mess, but it's like it'd be a good mess to have. And right now, it's a bad mess to have. There's no winning right now. It's all about trying to recoup value and hoping to not overpay guys. Meanwhile, you won 70 odd games last year, and you're in a situation now where you're stuck in a rock and a hard place. You've put yourself in a bad position, and they're gonna have to pay for it. And it's just it feels like it's been a cacophony of mistakes, and not to mention the overarching kind of dark cloud here. You've got Atkins and Shapiro both at the end of their terms as well. Who knows if they get brought back? So it kind of feels like this is a bit of an era moment here. And I just don't know if I'm comfortable with two guys that are fighting for their careers for all intents and purposes being the guys to decide the Blue Jays path moving forward, which in this case, I think is making any decision on Bo. I feel like Vlad is maybe a different story. You're confident that you want to keep him. You're confident that you want him. Any Bo Bichette decision should not be made by this group.
Why why does Mark Shapiro's contract expire before Ross Atkins? I feel that has never made sense to me why they, either don't come up at the same time or, the guy with more power doesn't have the longer deal. I never really understood that.
Yeah, your question, your guess is as good as mine. I guess maybe like it's something to the effect of maybe it's Shapiro gets signed on in 2016 and gets brought on for a longer stretch and then gets extended for a longer stretch, and maybe Atkins it was a shorter term deal and then another shorter term deal. I don't know, but nonetheless, it's insane that you might have a Ross Atkins in a post Mark Shapiro world. They didn't even know Ross Atkins had that kind of agency.
Could you imagine a world where Mark Shapiro's contract expires? They don't extend him. They bring in somebody else, and Ross Atkins stays on as GM.
I have a hard time believing that as a legitimate possibility.
That would be such a weird world where if that happened, where it would be, whoever they bring, James Click as the Pobo and Atkins as the GM.
No, I don't even know what that would look like. I would imagine that whoever the next Pobo is probably the next GM as well. But maybe it is this core, maybe it is this group, but I just remain very reluctant to believe so. This episode of the Bird's Eye View podcast is brought to you by BioSteel. Use code Bird's Eye View at checkout for 20% off your order at biosteel.ca. Again, that's code Bird's Eye View at checkout for 20% off your order. For all your high performance hydration needs, visit biosteel.ca. Thank you again to BioSteel for sponsoring today's episode.
All right, let's move on. Let's talk about some of the other news around the Blue Jays. They have been connected to a Canadian-born, Mississauga-born first baseman Josh Naylor by MLB nerds. So, take it with a grain of salt as far as the connection goes. But I do think that the interest makes sense given what this team has demonstrated over the past few years. What are your thoughts on the Blue Jays being linked to Josh Naylor?
I like the fit in terms of obviously they need a bopper, and he provides that. The lack of obviously positional versatility in any meaningful capacity makes any kind of projection or any kind of optimism around him obviously a little more murky. And he's not a certified home run hitter. He's not a certified slugger by any means either. But he's coming off of 2 really strong years in Cleveland, and they've got Kyle Manzardo coming up the pipeline. So he's clearly a guy that they're going to be open to trading. And you wonder if you can maybe get him almost on the cheap a little bit. And there's obviously similarities between a guy like him and a guy like Spencer Horwitz, but I think there is a little bit more offensive upside to the profile that a Josh Naylor brings in, and there's more of a fit profile wise in terms of what Josh Naylor brings versus what Spencer Horwitz brings. With Horwitz, he's not quite a good enough hitter to be a DH. He's not quite a good enough defender to be a second baseman. And even as a first baseman, he's a so defender, right? Like with Naylor, you're a little more comfortable maybe with his first base defense. And as a DH, he's got a stick that's actually a little bit further ahead of where maybe Horwitz's is right now. And that's not to say that Horwitz wouldn't be a better hitter in 2 or 3 years, but if the goal is to win, Naylor's bat fits that profile a lot more cleanly than that of Spencer Horwitz. So I like the fit, obviously, as well. Just the Canadian angle itself is just an easy one to root for. So you hope maybe they bring him in for that purpose. It would fill the Canadian quota after Romano leaves, but I just wonder what that would take, and I wonder if it would be something you could do at a cheap acquisition cost. Because if it's anything expensive, I just think that this is a team that can't be diverting assets towards first baseman. But the clear need is corner outfielders.
Yeah, he's a 30 home run bat. A guy coming off a 30 home run year. In 2023, he was really, really good in 2023. He hit 308, had the 17 homers in 121 games. Just a guy who probably Ross probably considers low-hanging fruit because he does the power thing, right? And it seems like kind of cheap power. So I think it would be a nice pickup. I'm not sure, necessarily how you would divert the playing time between him and Vlad. Obviously, I think we are on the side of Vlad is not a third baseman. But I'm sure, you can do enough mixing and matching as to where, the odd game at third for Vlad, a DH appearance for Naylor,
Well, here's here's what
DHing
I
for
here's what
Vlad.
I wonder. Here's what I wonder actually. Would it be the craziest thing if you went out and got Josh Naylor? You slotted Vlad at third, you flip Jimenez over to short, and you DH Bo. Is that something that you would consider? Because obviously, you're still dealing with the tough defense up the middle, or with one or the other, either Vlad or Bo. Does Jimenez
I,
cover for Vlad at all? Like, is that a
uh,
possibility?
I think I think Bo. I think that would tank his value pretty good if he was a DH at 26 as a shortstop, as a guy who probably
Well, if
prefers
he's
himself
open
as
to
a
playing
shortstop.
second base, like you put him in second base, but something tells me that Bo Bichette is not open to playing second base.
He's a guy like where you see like I feel like he wants to get his contract as a shortstop, right? Like you want to get paid as a shortstop, and then you're open to moving off that position.
Yeah, like a guy like again like Marcus
Like
Simeon.
Marcus Semien, yeah. So, yeah, who knows? It'd be interesting if they did get Naylor to see how they would go about it. But yeah, nonetheless, fun acquisition. Not sure if it's the cleanest of fits,
But
like you
what do
mentioned.
you see?
Obviously,
Like, what do you see as a potential opportunity there? Do you think that Naylor makes sense?
yeah, I think it probably leans into like him and Vlad like splitting time at first and DH. I think is probably
Yeah,
the best
yeah,
way.
that's
He
probably the logical
he
thing to do.
he's a left-handed hitter, which obviously they need, and it would be fun for sure. I know for him being a little bit older, I think he'll be 27 on opening day and then turning 28 in the middle of the year. Um, he's a guy who kind of has gotten some pretty good results out of a batted ball profile that isn't quite necessarily, he's not like a 12% barrel rate guy. He's more in the 8% range. And you know what he is though? He is a certain player. You kind of know what you're going to get for him. So, or from him. So I think it would be a decent ad. And obviously, like you mentioned, the Canadian angle is always fun. So
He is only I had to use my fingers to count here. July, August, September, October, November. He's 5 months older than Spencer Horwitz. There's 5 months between the two of them. That's surprising.
yeah. And obviously, you know what? The Cleveland connection. You gotta
The
keep up the
Cleveland
Cleveland
connection,
connection,
of
right?
course.
Him and Jimenez and Ernie Clement. I'm sure that they'd shared an infield before in
Yeah,
Cleveland.
I would say that and not to mention that the front office loves their Cleveland guys. Yeah, I mean the fit seems like it's there, superficial as it may be.
Some breaking news. The Blue Jays have officially announced some transactions. We already knew that they were bringing in Eric Lauer and Ali Sanchez on minor league deals with invites to spring training, but Eric Pardinho is back. They officially announced that he is
Ah,
back on a minor league deal with a invite to spring training. So nice little piece of business there, keeping him in the organization, I think, after what was a pretty solid 2024 for him.
that's exciting. I was surprised that he was let go initially, but it's good to know that he's going to be brought back. I'm a believer that he could be a part of a 2025 bullpen. I don't know if he's going to be an impact piece. He had a good year in Double A last year, so there's upside to be had. Obviously a ton of prospect pedigree once upon a time. Um, I'm pleased to hear that.
Yeah, yeah, nice little deal. I think yeah, obviously, like you mentioned, yeah, he was amazing in Double A. Like he barely gave up any runs, and then he got to Triple A, and I think he ran out of gas a little bit towards the end of the year. So we'll see how we kind of bounce back, and he'll be a guy to watch. I figure in spring training just to see kind of what if there's any chance that he can crack the 40 man, if he can beat out like a Nick Robertson, a enter enter a ton of
Yeah,
these
insert various quad A pitchers that the Blue Jays are going to be throwing at the
Brett
wall. We'll see who
DeGus,
sticks.
Brett DeGus,
Uh,
he's in
boy,
there. Michael Peterson is in there, Easton Lucas, all these kind of guys. So,
he'll be
um,
in that conversation. Needless to say, it's not a group of arms that you're hopefully going to be
yeah.
relying much on.
Another big piece of news, which we haven't talked about, but it was Hagen Danner and Leo Jimenez got the extra option year for 2024, or sorry, for 2025, um, which is really big, I think, for the Blue Jays having those two be available to be optioned to AAA next season because they are neither of them are guaranteed major leaguers, I think, next year.
Yeah, the Leo Jimenez one is the one that's really interesting to me.
Yeah.
Obviously, Hagen Danner is maybe a guy that pitches for the Blue Jays next year. You figure he probably gets in at some point, mid-season. I'd be surprised if he broke camp with the team, but the Jimenez one is particularly huge, I would say.
Yeah.
because he was likely to be a fringe DFA candidate. And now you're able to move him to AAA and shuttle him back and forth. That creates a lot of flexibility for what they're able to do with him and to keep him in the organization.
I think I'm a little bit higher on Leo than you are. But one thing that the Andres Jimenez trade did was really muddy the future for him with the Blue Jays, I think, because Leo's path to being a major leaguer was being a solid shortstop who can swing it a little bit and being kind of the next shortstop if Bo left, right? But now if Bo leaves, obviously they have Andres Jimenez who can do that. So I don't know, maybe Leo is kind of trade bait this offseason. He's still super young and I think showed solid enough results at the major league level to warrant being like a valuable asset in a trade or kind of anything like that. I think it'll be interesting to see how they handle him now that they don't necessarily need his glove at short. And obviously, same goes for Josh Kasevich too, right? Like those two are kind of very similar players. And if their most attractive asset as a solid shortstop defender isn't quite needed as they breach the major leagues, then what do you do with those guys?
Well, I think they both have a lot of value, and I mean, and maybe it's an easy comparison to make because he's on the tip of the tongue. But Leo Jimenez and Andres Jimenez to me could have similar profiles as major leaguers. It feels like it seems like that'd be an aspirational thing for a guy like Jimenez, the younger, to aspire to.
They need to trade him just so we don't have to deal with the Jimenez thing.
You're not looking for a Jimenez double play battery here.
That would actually be pretty
That'd be
fun,
fun. That'd be pretty fun. I wonder if that's ever happened before. Has a double play ever been turned by two guys with the same name
but different names.
but different names? I
Uh,
guess we'll see.
can maybe we can bring Dante Bichette back and put him up the middle with Bo.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, interesting there. I don't think, we'll see how it goes. If you think trading Leo or you think stashing him in the minors until 2027 or sorry, 2026 and seeing kind of what plays out with Bo before maybe making a move there.
Yeah, pro Leo, pro El Jimenez. But I think that with him, that option year gives you time, but
Yeah.
it's time to decide what you want to do with him, not necessarily time for him to develop.
I'm gonna put you on the spot here. Long-term future, you only get to pick one, Josh Kasevich or Leo Jimenez.
Probably Leo Jimenez. I think he's more of a real shortstop. I think he probably has a better chance to stick at the position. Kasevich has the more compelling bat, but if the bat doesn't translate to the major leagues, and goodness knows that a lot of shortstops that the Blue Jays have brought up over the years haven't had their bats translate to the major leagues. If he follows suit, then I feel like just the floor that Jimenez provides is probably a bit more compelling.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because Kasevich he's Rule 5 eligible next winter. So, I think that 2025 is going to be really big for Leo because Kasevich is there, Jimenez, Andres is there. So that he's he's probably got to fight for a spot this year, and if it's not there, then he's probably on his way out if he doesn't get traded before that.
Yeah, there's some big decisions to be made, but there's always some big decisions to be made at this time because the Blue Jays are just everything is just always so murky with this team.
Yes. All right, let's move on to our final thing that we're going to do today. And, we're going to have a little bit of fun looking ahead to the 2025 Blue Jays. We are both going to plant our flag on two players each as to players that we believe will be successful or impactful or have some sort of intrigue to the Toronto Blue Jays in 2025. If you've listened to this podcast, I'm sure you could almost guess who both of us are going to pick, but we're going to do one pitcher and one hitter each. And Jory, I will let you have the floor. Go ahead and you can lead the direction that this goes here.
Sure, I'll start with my hitter because this one comes to me a lot a lot easier. Um, you know, I there was some negativity when they made this move just last week, but I am a believer in the upside that Andres Jimenez can provide to the Blue Jays. I remember last year, I was going on about Dalton Varsho could be a 5-win player, and there he was. He just needed to be a league average bat, and he was a league average bat, and the defense basically told the rest of the story. And if Andres Jimenez is the infielder Dalton Varsho, then who would I be if not to be pro Andres Jimenez? Now, am I particularly thrilled about what Andres Jimenez means implication wise for the rest of the Blue Jays offseason if his, you know, contractual obligations prevent the Blue Jays from making other moves? That's a different discussion. But I will plant my flag on 5 WAR, maybe even 6 WAR,
Wow.
Andres Jimenez.
Wow, the bounce back. He believes in it. He believes in the bounce back.
I am
I think
buying
that's fun.
stock. I am buying
Um,
Andres Jimenez stock.
it's interesting. We put this in the notes, but we didn't necessarily touch on it. Andres Jimenez met with Blue Jays media for the first time this week, and he kind of talked about some mechanical changes that he's making at the plate and trying to swing at less pitches outside the zone. So I think that's interesting, and if he is able to kind of clean up his swing decisions a little bit, I think that there relatively is a pathway to him finding a little bit better batted ball success. Obviously, walking a little bit more comes with that. So, for a guy who I think he just had like a 280 OBP last year, I think, a little bit extra walks, a little more patience probably would be very beneficial to him reaching that league average mark at the plate for sure.
That would be helpful for sure.
All right, I am going to go for my hitter that I'm going to plant my flag on, and it is Will Wagner ending the season as the Blue Jays leadoff guy.
It's a fun one. That's a fun one.
It's
I thought
fairly.
I thought you were gonna go with a different guy from that trade. I was thinking maybe you might go low Perfido, but Will Wagner's a fun one.
I need to see a couple strides from Loperfido after the way he ended last year. But no, I think Wagner, obviously, you know what, he showed, you know, fairly good results in his first go round at the major leagues. There's, some BABIP luck in there for sure, but I think you look at the way he puts the barrel on the ball. He walked a ton in the minor leagues and didn't walk a bunch in his first call with the Blue Jays there. So I think what you'll see is some regression in terms of the batted ball stuff, right? Like you'll see probably less balls go for hits. He'll probably drop the average a little bit, but I figure the walks will come up a bit, so his walk rate will increase. I think the OBP will go up. I think the steamer projection, like 351 OBP, sounds great to me. Obviously, he's not going to hit for a ton of power. I think you just look at the bat path, and there isn't necessarily a ton of loft in there, so he's not going to get to a ton of power, even though he does hit the ball super hard, right? Like he has a really high hard hit rate, everything like that. So I think he's going to be a guy that gets on base a bunch and kind of profiles as like your prototypical leadoff guy.
Yeah, I like the thought of that. He doesn't necessarily seem like the kind of guy that's going to be a game changer just in terms of what he brings, but he is, I think, exactly the kind of guy you want as part of your team. He's the kind of guy that you look at other teams and you're kind of like, man, I wish the Jays had a guy like that. Will Wagner feels like that type of guy.
He just needs a position, which we'll see. Hopefully that gets resolved. I could see, the problem with that would be that he doesn't have a position, so he doesn't have the playing time to earn his way into the leadoff role. But I'm sure if he hits enough, they'll find a spot for him.
Yeah, he'll either play second base or maybe he can fake it at third if there's any inclement regression. Maybe you shove him in the corner outfield spot. I mean, David Schneider came up as a second baseman and moved over to left field, and they were trying to get his bat into the lineup, and they did. And obviously, he had so much success in the first half of last season, and second half notwithstanding with the struggles there, he was able to move around and provide flexibility. And I can't imagine that Will Wagner wouldn't be a similar story.
All right, give me your pitcher.
I was gonna say if you want to take the pitcher because I got first dibs on the hitter.
All right. All right. I will take that offer and go with it. And I'm sticking with a Liberty University grad. Both of my picks graduated from Liberty. I'm going to the Buffalo Bisons and I'm selecting Mason Fluharty. Shocker. We are a Mason Fluharty pod here, but I'm planting my flag on him as the best left-handed Blue Jays reliever in 2025.
So you have spoken at length at Fluharty. Do you want to just kind of wax poetic a little bit about him, so to speak, for a couple seconds here, just exactly why you think he's the lefty?
I think he has the stuff. I think when you look at his numbers from 2024, like the ERA and stuff, like everything's inflated because they started using him as like a multi-inning reliever and a guy who he threw 67 innings in 56 appearances, right? So he was working, a lot longer, facing a lot of right-handers. His splits were fairly stark in the difference between how he performed against right-handers against left-handers. And I think as he emerges into it to a major league reliever, right, like his role is going to be as a one inning lefty, right? Like I don't see him becoming like a multi-inning reliever at the major league level because he is just so effective against left-handers. So I think if you took his sample last year and you kind of squished it down into like an inning per appearance instead of multiple innings at a time, that he looks really, really good. And obviously the slider's really good. Um, I think he just kind of profiles as like this young reliever that probably deserves a shot to be a guy at the big league level. The stuff is great. The strikeouts are there. The control is there. The home run suppression is fairly good. And I think that there's a decent chance that he could emerge as like better than a Brandon Little or a Brandon Isert or any of these guys that they currently have on the roster. And obviously that is withstanding any further additions that they make to the bullpen in regards to a left-handed reliever. But I do think that the profile and the way that he's been used so far kind of hides his effectiveness.
Yeah. No, you've gone here with two young guys, and I'm gonna kind of be the yin to your yang here, and I've already gone with one guy that's a bit of a veteran, and I'll go with another one, another reliever though. I am an Eric Swanson believer, and
Nice.
obviously his second half was much better than his first half, but he was just abysmal, obviously, to start last season for reasons presumably outside of his control and obviously injury, not to mention. But in the second half, he looked like Eric Swanson again. And the Blue Jays need leverage arms because right now it's you know Jimmy Garcia and pray for rain, and they need Swanson to be Eric Swanson again. And I'm a believer. I feel like Eric Swanson is much more second half Eric Swanson, a la 2023 Eric Swanson, more than he is battling injuries, battling off field conditions, struggling in AAA Eric Swanson. I think that there's still a talented reliever to be found there. And I think countries need there to be a talented reliever there because of how bad their bullpen was last year and the lack of certainty and the lack of returning pieces, really, that the bullpen has to offer for this upcoming season.
I really like that pick. I think he's due for a really nice season, really nice bounce back. What do you think about Eric Swanson potential closer by June or July?
I think it's a possibility. I think it's a distinct possibility. I think there's basically three guys that are options to close for the Blue Jays. I think you're looking at Jimmy. I think you're looking at Chad Green, and I think you're looking at Eric Swanson. And anyone else beyond that group would be a pretty substantial surprise. If I were to handicap it, I'd say Chad Green probably comes out of the gate as the closer, and if I were to guess, probably loses it to Jimmy within the first month or two. But I would expect that Eric Swanson's in the mix and swirling there, and it wouldn't be surprising if he finished second on the Blue Jays in saves by the end of the season.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a reasonable take. I think definitely a guy that you're rooting for to get back and perform well. Just obviously really tough 2024 for him, and hopefully 2025 is a lot more normal as he kind of
Exactly,
gets back to.
an underratedly important part of the 2025 Blue Jays, at least in my view.
Yeah, 100%. The way that their bullpen is set up, I mean, if you can at least have some confidence in the eighth and ninth inning with Swanson and Jimmy, or 7, 8, 9 in Swanson, Jimmy and Green, or 6, 7, 8, 9 with Mason Fluharty, Swanson, Jimmy and Green, then you can feel a little bit better about
They really
the
are just
team.
throwing slop at the wall, eh? They're really just chucking slop at the. I guess that's what a bullpen is.
You gotta do it sometimes. You gotta just find the guys that are going to be the effective relievers, and you never know who it's going to be. So.
I
I
guess we'll
really
see. I
appreciate that we
guess.
both went with the relievers for our flag plants.
I feel like
Um,
we're. I feel like it's a bit of a. I feel like it's a bit of a sign of where the Blue Jays are right now. That there is so much uncertainty, especially on the bullpen side, that you're praying that someone puts it all together.
we might have to revisit this exercise in March and see if any of our thoughts have changed as the roster changes and as the team progresses, and if there's of course any major moves. So
Like a Corbin Burns or something.
I would plant my flag on Corbin Burns.
If you get that, I get Vlad.
That's fair. That's fair. Any other you want to go another flag, or are you happy with your two?
I'm pretty happy with my two.
All right. Well, that is going to do it for us here today at the Bird's Eye View podcast. Make sure to hit the subscribe and like buttons if you're watching on YouTube. You can find us there at the Bird's Eye View podcast. If you're listening along on the podcast provider of your choice, make sure to drop a follow and review. You can follow us all on Twitter or X. I am at Warden_Zach. Jori is at Jori Negin-Shecter. And the pod is at BEV_pod. Thank you so much for listening.